title, The Balance Due. Consider Marcus Hale, a man who has spent 11 years collecting what others owe. He is neither cruel nor kind, merely efficient, the way a drain is efficient, pulling everything downward without preference or malice. In the sprawling, luminous city of 2031, debt has evolved beyond money. A company called Meridian has found a way to quantify something previously unmeasurable. The time you have wasted, the years you have borrowed against your future self. Marcus has never questioned this. He has never needed to. Tonight, however, the ledger opens to a page he has never been permitted to read, his own. The billboard outside Marcus's window cycled every 8 seconds. Meridian Life Credit Solutions, because your future is worth protecting. Then, a woman laughing on a beach, children running toward her in slow motion, the sun hammered flat in gold like a coin. Then the logo again, a perfect circle bisected by a single vertical line, the universal symbol for a ledger balanced. Marcus had watched this cycle approximately 11,000 times in the 3 years he'd lived in this apartment. He knew the exact moment the transition light strobed blue through his blinds, the precise duration of the woman's laugh before it cut to black. He was eating cereal at 6:14 a.m. when his terminal chimed with the day's cue. 43 accounts. Tuesday had always been heavy. He pulled on his field jacket, the gray one with the Meridian patch on the left shoulder, a small embroidered ledger, and checked the charge on his collection wand. The device looked like a stylus, matte, black, and featureless, roughly the length of a butter knife. Most people who saw it assumed it was a phone stylus or a medical injector. This was intentional. Meridian's design team had focus grouped the shape extensively. Marcus rode the elevator down through the building's 14 floors of stacked life. He could hear from behind closed doors the sounds of people metabolizing their mornings, an argument conducted in Mandarin, a news feed reporting on the Pacific Shelf collapse, a baby exhausting itself with the primal mathematics of hunger. He did not think about these sounds as belonging to people. He thought about them the way a plumber thinks about pipes, systems, all of it, carrying things from one place to another. His car was a Meridian Company model, gray to match the jacket, climate sealed against the yellow particulate that had settled permanently at street level since 28. He unlocked it with his Meridian badge, and the queue populated across the windshield. Names, addresses, amounts owed, and beside each entry, a number in red that indicated the years being reclaimed today. He pulled into traffic without looking at the numbers closely. He never did initially. It was better to arrive cold. The first account was a woman named Portia Venn, 44, who lived in a high-rise in the Meridian subsidized district they now called the grid, 40 blocks of residential towers built on the promise of life credit financing. She had borrowed 8 years of future vitality in 2027 to treat her daughter's spinal condition, a degenerative thing that the public health system had declined to cover in full. The treatment had worked. The daughter walked. Portia had not made a qualifying payment in 6 months. She opened the door in a bathrobe, hair still damp, and Marcus recognized the precise geometry of her expression, the way the fear arranged itself around her eyes while the jaw locked into dignity. He had seen this configuration on hundreds of faces. "Mrs. Venn," he said. "I'm Marcus Hale from Meridian. I have a collection order for—" "I know why you're here." Her voice was controlled in the way of someone who had been rehearsing this conversation for weeks. "I filed for a deferment extension last Thursday. That extension was denied. I'm sorry. I need you to submit to the withdrawal." She looked at the wand in his hand. Her daughter appeared behind her, a teenager, maybe 15, moving with the unconscious ease of a body that had been repaired rather than born correct. She had earbuds in and was looking at her phone, and she said, "Mom, who is it?" without looking up. "Go back to your room, baby." The withdrawal process took 4 minutes. Portia Venn sat in her kitchen chair with the stillness of someone trying very hard not to make a sound. The wand interfaced with the quantum biological chip embedded in her left wrist, the chip that every Meridian borrower received at contract signing, approximately the size of a grain of rice, which monitored and regulated the life credit balance. It did not remove time the way you might remove a splinter. It recalibrated the body's cellular repair rate, its metabolic efficiency, its immune cascade responsiveness, the precise biological mechanisms that Meridian's researchers had identified in 2026, as the physiological correlates of what humans had always vaguely called vitality. You could not see the withdrawal happening, but in the weeks after, borrowers reported a subtle heaviness in the joints, a fogging at the edges of memory. A threshold of fatigue arrived at sooner than before. They were losing years. That was the contract language. It was also, Marcus believed, literally accurate. He left a printed receipt on her kitchen table and did not look at the daughter. By noon, he had cleared 17 accounts. He ate lunch in his car, a protein bar, and reconstituted coffee from the company canteen system, and watched the queue update in real time as his completed accounts synced with Meridian's central processing network called the ledger. The ledger was not quite an AI in the way that term had originally been understood. It was something more intimate and more surgical, a distributed intelligence that did nothing except track the flow of life credits across the population of subscribers, calculating balances, projecting mortality-adjusted repayment windows, and issuing collection orders with an efficiency that made Marcus, by comparison, feel like an abacus. He had never met anyone at Meridian above his direct supervisor, a man named Kowalski, who smelled of synthetic cedar and communicated almost exclusively through annotated queue updates. The company itself existed mostly as a vast, clean building in the Northern District that no field agent had ever, to Marcus's knowledge, been invited into. He did not find this troubling. He found it orderly. His phone rang at 12:47 p.m. It was his mother. He watched it ring 4 times, then sent it to voicemail. His mother, Elaine, was 67 and lived in the outer suburb of Kettleford, in the house Marcus had grown up in. She had borrowed life credits herself, a modest amount, 3 years, to manage the costs of his father's illness a decade ago. She made her payments reliably, in the way of someone who had lived through a generation that still understood debt as a moral condition rather than a financial one. She called Marcus on Tuesdays and Fridays. He answered roughly 1 call in 3. He thought about this for a moment after the voicemail notification appeared. Then he started the car. Account 31 was a man named Devereaux Okafor, 26, graduate student in urban hydrology, who had borrowed 4 years to fund his dissertation research after his scholarship collapsed in the university funding crisis of 2029. He lived in a single room in a converted warehouse in the Flats district, the walls decorated with topographical maps and hand-drawn water table diagrams. He was not home. Marcus left a notice on the door and logged a return visit, feeling something he would not identify as relief. Account 35 was an elderly man who did not speak English and who cried silently throughout the 4 minutes while a neighbor translated the paperwork into Vietnamese. Marcus drove 3 blocks after this one and sat in the car without moving for approximately 90 seconds, which was unusual for him. It was account 38 that changed everything. He pulled up to the address in the mid-district, a commercial block of mixed-use towers, a coffee place at street level, holograms cycling above the doorways, and checked the account details for the first time in his usual way just before entering. The name on the account was Marcus Damon Hale. His own address was his current apartment. The subscriber ID was his Meridian employee number. The outstanding balance was 11 years, 4 months, and 17 days of life credits. The repossession order was flagged priority, same day, non-deferrable. He read it 3 times. He checked the account number against his own. He sat in the company car outside his own building. He had driven on autopilot essentially to his own building, and the Meridian billboard pulsed above him. Because your future is worth protecting. The woman laughed on her beach. The children ran. He called Kowalski. I'm looking at something strange in my queue, Marcus said. All queues are generated by the ledger, Kowalski said. There was the sound of annotating in the background, the soft percussion of a stylus on glass. If it's there, it's there. The account is mine. My own employee profile is flagged for collection. A pause. Are you currently on the subscriber list, Marcus? No, I'm a field agent. I was never... He stopped. He thought of the onboarding paperwork from 2020, 11 years ago. He had been 20, a community college dropout with no prospects, and the recruiter had been friendly, and the office had been clean, and the signing bonus had been real money. He thought of the packet of forms he had signed. He had been told the life credit subscription was a standard employment benefit, a kind of enhanced health monitoring, and that the chip implant was part of the Meridian wellness program. He had not read every page. Nobody reads every page. I would advise completing the queue in order, Kowalski said, and disconnected. Marcus sat in the car. He understood with the quiet, awful completeness of a man encountering a mirror in an unexpected room what the last 11 years had been. The ledger didn't just track subscribers, it tracked value production, and Marcus had spent 11 years collecting from people who borrowed time, and in doing so had processed on behalf of Meridian a staggering tonnage of reclaimed vitality, years extracted from hundreds of lives, and none of that reclaimed time had vanished. It had gone somewhere. It had been credited to the company, to the ledger, which meant it had been borrowed from somewhere too. He looked at his hand on the steering wheel, 31 years old. He tried to remember if he felt 31, and could not identify what 31 was supposed to feel like. He thought of the way Portia Venn had sat in her kitchen chair, very still. He thought of the Vietnamese man's silent crying. He thought of 11 years of driving gray cars through yellow air and eating protein bars and sending his mother to voicemail. He thought, what did I do with it? He did not go upstairs. He drove instead to Kettleford. The suburb was 40 minutes out, past the ring of distribution warehouses and solar panel fields, into the older residential grid that the city had not yet absorbed or demolished. The houses were small and particular, each one slightly wrong in a way that indicated genuine human habitation over time. A porch that sagged, a garage door painted a color that no longer matched anything, a garden that had evolved beyond its original intention into something feral and personal. His mother's house had a fig tree in the front yard that his father had planted before Marcus was born. The figs were coming in, small and green, far from ripe. Elaine Hale opened the door before he knocked. She had the supernatural advance warning of a mother who had raised a difficult child. You never come on a Tuesday, she said. I know. She fed him, because this was the only vocabulary she fully trusted. Rice, and something from a pot that had been on the stove since morning, and she sat across from him and watched him eat with the particular attention of someone cataloging evidence. You look tired, she said. You've looked tired for years. I'm 31. Your father looked like that at 31 too. She paused. It was the job. The jobs men take because they don't know what else to do with themselves. They wear the job like skin, and then one morning they can't find where the job ends. Marcus put down his fork. Mom, when you signed the Meridian contract, did you read all the terms? She gave him the look she reserved for questions with obvious answers. No one reads all the terms, Marcus. That's how terms work. There's a clause, he said, and stopped, because he was not certain how to continue. There's a clause that says they can take your years. There's a clause I signed too, and I've spent 11 years taking other people's years, and now the machine wants mine, and I don't know what I did with the ones I had. Instead, he said, how are your payments for your account? Current, she said, with the firmness of a woman, for whom this word was a moral achievement, always current. He stayed for 2 hours. He helped her with the stuck window in the back bedroom, and they watched 20 minutes of something on TV that neither of them tracked. When he stood to leave, she held his face in both hands in the way she had done since he was a child, examining him. Whatever it is, she said, don't wait until you've lost everything to decide what matters. He drove back to the city. He sat in the Meridian building's parking structure for a long time, reading the collection order. The mechanics of his own case were different from a standard account. He had no wrist chip. He'd never received one, which meant the extraction would require a clinic appointment rather than field one processing. The order included an automated appointment confirmation for Thursday morning, 9 a.m., at the Meridian Health Center in the Northern District, 47 hours from now. He thought about running. He thought about this with the same analytical detachment he usually brought to his queue, mapping the actual logistics, money, distance, the fact that his Meridian badge controlled his car, his apartment access, his health insurance, his credit profile. The degree to which he had permitted his life to be structured around a single company's infrastructure was mapped out this way, genuinely impressive. The ledger knew this. The ledger had been counting on it. He went back to work. He completed accounts 39 through 43 that afternoon. He was precise and efficient, and he gave each person the full 4 minutes, and he left receipts on tables, and he did not hurry. He thought about what his mother had said about jobs you wear like skin. He thought about Portia Venn's daughter moving through the kitchen with the easy, unconscious grace of a repaired body, At 7 p.m., he returned to his apartment and sat at his terminal and opened his personal Meridian account for the first time in 3 years. He had never had reason to check it. Field agents processed others, their own accounts were managed at the administrative level. The dashboard was clean and minimal in the way of all Meridian design, white space, that bisected circle, numbers. 11 years, 4 months, 17 days, outstanding. Below the balance, as on all accounts, was a field labeled Source of Obligation. On subscriber accounts, this read Voluntary Credit Agreement, date. On Marcus's account, it read something different. Productivity Harvest, Employment Contracts 47B, ongoing. He read the section reference 4 times. Then he found his original employment contract in the archived files he kept on a personal drive, a habit of mild administrative paranoia that had, he now understood, saved him something essential. He found section 47B on page 31 of 44. Agent acknowledges that field collection activity generates life credit yield surplus beyond standard subscriber agreement. Said surplus, designated productivity harvest, shall accrue to Meridian's Central Reserve. In periods of reserve deficit, Meridian reserves the right to reclaim productivity harvest from the generating agent's biological account at the standard reclamation rate. Agent's biological account shall be deemed active upon chip implantation at onboarding. He had not received a chip at onboarding. He remembered specifically that the recruiter had said the implant was optional for field agents, that they could decline if they had needle concerns, and that it would have no effect on employment. He had declined not from needle concern but from vague unease, the instinct of a 20-year-old who still trusted his own body more than any company's wellness program. He read for 74 four-fist bug again, then again. Agent's biological account shall be deemed active upon chip implantation at onboarding. He did not have a chip. He had never had a chip. There was no biological account. There was no interface point. The wand in his jacket pocket was useless on a body with no chip, the same way you couldn't drain a tank with no valve. The collection order had been generated by the ledger, by an intelligence that tracked numbers and balances and aggregate flows and had apparently never modeled the specific edge case of an agent who had declined the implant. A human administrator would have caught this. The ledger, optimizing for efficiency across 43 accounts and 11 years of continuous operation, had not. The appointment on Thursday was, technically, the first moment at which anyone at Meridian would interact with these specifics of his case, would discover the discrepancy. 47 hours had become, he now calculated 39. He called Kowalski at 8:30 p.m. Kowalski did not answer. He called the Meridian Client Services line and sat on hold for 22 minutes before a recorded voice explained that account disputes required written submission and a 14-day review period, and that pending collection orders remained active during review. He emailed Kowalski. He emailed the HR department using the address he found in his original onboarding packet. He composed the message carefully, the specific clause, the specific exemption, the absence of a chip, the resulting impossibility of the order. He read it back. It was the most precise thing he had written in 11 years. He thought about who he was sending it to. He thought about the ledger, not as a malevolent thing, not as a conspiracy, but as what it actually was. A system built to optimize collection, staffed at the human level by people like Kowalski who processed annotated queue updates and smelled of synthetic cedar and had never been given a reason to question the outputs. A system that had never been wrong before, a system whose entire operating logic was built on the assumption that the ledger always balanced. He sent the email and went to bed and did not sleep. At 4 a.m., he got up and dressed and made coffee and stood at his window watching the billboard, because your future is worth protecting. He thought about the future he had spent 11 years not protecting. Not dramatically, not in any way that would make a good story, just the small, consistent, ordinary failures of a person who had found a job and worn it like skin until he could not find where it ended. The calls he had sent to voicemail, the fig tree he had not visited, the Devereaux Okafors he had been vaguely relieved to miss. He thought about Portia Venn sitting in her kitchen chair with the stillness of someone trying very hard not to make a sound. He picked up his collection wand. He turned it over in his hands. Then he opened his queue for the next day and looked at the accounts scheduled for Wednesday's collection. There were 41 of them. He thought for a very long time. At 6 a.m., he drove to the Flats district and knocked on Devereaux Okafor's door. The young man answered in a t-shirt and sleep-disarranged expression, then registered the Meridian jacket and went careful and still. "I was here yesterday," Marcus said. "I left a notice. I saw it." Okafor's voice was measured in the way of someone managing fear through deliberate control of volume. "I'm filing for an academic deferment. I have the forms. Your research," Marcus said. "The water table work. Is it close?" Okafor blinked. "What?" "Your dissertation, the urban hydrology. Are you close to finishing?" The young man looked at him with an expression Marcus had never seen directed at himself before. The raw, disoriented look of someone encountering unexpected attention where they had braced for erasure. 6 months, he said finally, maybe 4 if I can keep the lab access. The deferment forms you mentioned, if they were properly filed with documentation of active academic progress, the review timeline would run past your projected completion. Okafor stared at him. "Are you telling me to file them?" "I'm a field agent, not an administrator. I can't tell you anything about the deferment process." Marcus looked at the door frame, the topographical maps visible behind the young man's shoulder, the blue pendle lines of water moving underground through a city that desperately needed someone to understand it. "I'm just saying that deferments exist, and the ledger processes paperwork in queue order, same as everything else." He left before Okafor could respond. He drove back through the yellow morning air and thought about what he had just done and what it would accomplish. Almost nothing. One account, 1 4-month window. The ledger would catch up. The ledger always caught up. But Devereaux Okafor's water table research might be finished. And the water table mattered. And the research mattered. And the 4 months were real. He filed his own dispute documentation from the car, attaching the original employment contract with Spaction 47B flagged, the onboarding records showing his implant declination, and a clear legal notation that without a biological chip, the collection order had no valid extraction mechanism and was therefore void by the contract's own terms. He sent it simultaneously to Kowalski, HR, Meridian's legal compliance address, and his own personal archive. Then he drove to his first account of the day. He completed 19 of Wednesday's 41 accounts. The other 22 he found reasons to reschedule: wrong address on file, occupant unreachable, vehicle malfunction requiring return to depot, a cascade of mundane procedural failures logged in language so standard and uninteresting that the ledger's automated monitoring would process them as routine. He was not certain how long this would last before the pattern triggered an audit. He estimated 2 or 3 days. Perhaps a week if Kowalski remained as incurious as his nature suggested. He called his mother on the way back. She answered on the second ring. "Twice in 2 days," she said. "Should I be worried?" "I just wanted to talk," he said, which was true, and which he recognized was something he had not said to anyone in a very long time. They talked until he reached the building. She told him about the fig tree. The figs were coming in early this year, she thought, the warm winter, and about a neighbor's new baby and about a documentary she'd watched about glaciers. He listened, and the city moved past his windows, holographic lights cycling through the yellow air, and he was aware of something he couldn't name precisely, not happiness exactly, not relief, something more like the sensation of recognizing your own face after a long estrangement. He went upstairs. At 11 p.m. his email chimed. It was Kowalski. "The dispute documentation has been logged and forwarded to legal compliance. Per standard protocol, your Thursday appointment remains active pending review outcome. Recommend attending appointment to allow clinical assessment to confirm chip status. Review will proceed from there." Marcus read this twice, then he understood what it meant, and what Kowalski almost certainly also understood. The review would confirm he had no chip. The collection order would be voided. The 11 years of productivity harvest would remain on the books as an irrecoverable accounting entry, uncollectible, by the contract's own design. The ledger would record it as a deficit. The ledger had never recorded a deficit. He set an alarm for 8 a.m. and brushed his teeth and stood at the window one last time. The billboard pulsed. The woman laughed. The children ran toward her through the slow gold afternoon. He thought, I don't know what I did with 11 years, then. I know what I'm doing with Thursday. He went to bed and slept, the way you sleep when something has been decided, not comfortably, but completely. Thursday he attended the appointment. The clinic was clean and white, and the technician was professional. And when she scanned his left wrist, the device returned nothing, and she frowned at her terminal and said, "It's showing no implant record." "I know," Marcus said. She ran it twice more. Then she made a call, then another. He sat in the chair and waited, looking at his hands, which were the hands of a 31-year-old man who had 11 years behind him and, if the ledger's own contract language held, nothing legally taken from what lay ahead. The call took 40 minutes. Kowalski appeared in person, the synthetic cedar smell confirming his identity before Marcus turned, along with a woman from legal compliance who introduced herself as Strand and who carried a tablet and asked Marcus to walk her through the timeline of his onboarding chip declination. He walked her through it. She made notes. She conferred quietly with Kowalski. She looked at Marcus with an expression he recognized as professional neutrality being maintained over something more complicated. "We'll need a formal review period," Strand said. "The collection order will be suspended pending outcome. You understand this doesn't represent an admission on Meridian's part?" "I understand," Marcus said. "I have the same contract language memorized that you do." She looked at him. Something shifted, fractionally, in the professional neutrality. It might have been respect. It might have been simple recognition, one ledger reader acknowledging another. "You're still employed," Kowalski said from the corner of the room. He said it in the tone of a man who is making a statement that is also in some way a question. Marcus considered this for a moment. "I have some thoughts about my queue management going forward," he said. "I'd like to schedule time to discuss them." Kowalski made a sound that was not quite an answer. Marcus drove home through the yellow air, past the billboard, the woman, the children, the gold, and thought about Portia Venn's daughter walking through the kitchen. He thought about Devereux Okafor's water table maps, blue lines tracing the movement of something essential underneath a city too busy to notice it was there. He thought about his mother's fig tree, the figs coming in small and green and not yet ready but coming. He parked the gray car. He took off the jacket with the embroidered ledger on the shoulder and laid it on the passenger seat. He went upstairs without it. Marcus Hale will keep his job for now. The ledger will be updated with a notation it has never carried before, uncollectible. Whether this constitutes a flaw in the system or a feature the system was never designed to accommodate is a question that accountants and ethicists will argue about for some time. But the more interesting question belongs to Marcus himself, and it is the question all of us carry, whether we work for Meridian or merely live in a world that Meridian has made convenient. Not how much time do we have, but what are we spending it on, and on whose behalf and at what cost to the person who comes to the door. The haunting area has always known something that ledgers cannot record, that the most significant debts are the ones we owe to ourselves. And those, unlike the others, cannot be repossessed. They can only be paid.